Hello and welcome to Story Verdict. Today I'm going to tell you the story of my mom helped my husband steal my $50 trust to fund his mistress. At dawn, I unmasked as the group chairman and left them with nothing. The story goes like this. The first time I saw my husband kiss his mistress, my mother was standing beside them, adjusting the young woman's diamond necklace and warning her not to smear lipstick on the collar of the tuxedo I had paid for. I was 20 feet away in the glass corridor outside the east salon of Bellhaven House, wearing disposable shoe covers over hospital flats because I had been discharged from surgery less than 6 hours earlier and had stopped at my mother's mansion only to collect the laptop she claimed I had left there. The incision beneath my blouse still burned whenever I breathed too deeply. My right hand trembled from anesthesia. The surgeon had removed a benign ovarian tumor that morning, and I had been instructed to go home, rest, and avoid stress. Instead, I watched my biological mother smooth the lapel of my husband's jacket, while a 27-year-old woman named Sienna Vale rested both hands against his chest and said, "Tomorrow night she signs the divorce papers. And after that we never have to pretend again." My husband Daniel Mercer laughed softly. "She will sign. Evelyn has spent her entire life doing whatever her mother tells her." My mother, Margaret Quinn, corrected him. "Not whatever I tell her. Whatever makes her believe she is still useful." They all smiled. My body became very still. Bellhaven House was a 12-bedroom limestone mansion in Westbridge, surrounded by gardens, a private lake, and a guest wing larger than the apartment where Daniel and I had begun our marriage. My mother told everyone her late husband had left it to her. My father had left her debts. I had purchased the mansion through an Apex Global Property Trust 8 years earlier, cleared the liens, renovated the roof, and given Margaret a lifetime occupancy agreement because she cried while telling me that losing the family home would destroy her. Bellhaven had never been our family home. She had first seen it during a charity tour and decided it represented the life she deserved. I bought it because I mistook relief on her face for love. Daniel knew Apex had financed the purchase, but he believed Apex belonged to a discreet consortium of foreign investors. He did not know I owned 100% of the group through layered trusts created by my father. My mother did not know either. To them, I was Evelyn Quinn Mercer, a 34-year-old senior finance manager who wore ordinary suits, drove a 7-year-old sedan, and came home late because corporate accounting required long hours. In reality, I was the founder and executive chairwoman of Apex Global Partners, an investment and infrastructure group holding banks, technology funds, private credit firms, hotels, media companies, logistics networks, and real estate across 4 continents. I had spent 13 years building it behind my grandmother's surname, Hart. Public records identified the controlling owner as the Hart Sovereign Trust. Industry journalists referred to the anonymous chair as E. Hart and assumed he was an elderly European financier. Only my board, senior counsel, security team, and a handful of regulators knew that E. Hart was Evelyn Hart Quinn, the woman my husband called financially timid and my mother described as lucky to have married an ambitious man. I could have opened the salon door. I could have thrown a vase, screamed, demanded explanations, or allowed the shock to turn my body into a weapon. Instead, I stayed behind the glass and listened. Pain becomes information when you have spent enough years studying risk. Sienna stepped away from Daniel and looked at herself in the mirror. She was beautiful in a polished, deliberate way, with dark gold hair, pale green eyes, and the controlled posture of someone who had spent her life being photographed. My mother introduced her to society as the daughter of an old friend who had died abroad. In truth, Sienna's mother had worked with Margaret on charity events years earlier, and Sienna had built a modest social media following around fashion, travel, and inherited elegance she did not actually possess. Daniel first met her at one of my mother's dinners 14 months before I saw them together. Margaret arranged the seating. She invited me too, then called 30 minutes before the meal and said my father's old storage account required urgent attention. The account had no issue. She simply wanted me absent. "The divorce settlement must be signed before the trust transfer becomes visible," my mother said. Daniel poured champagne. "The transfer is already done. Control is temporary until the review window closes." Martin says Evelyn will not notice. Martin Shaw was my mother's attorney and, until 3 weeks earlier, one of the outside lawyers responsible for maintaining my father's $50 million family trust. My father, Henry Quinn, had created the trust during his final year of life. He was a mathematician who became a patient investor, building a portfolio of obscure technology and infrastructure assets before most people understood their value. When he died from pancreatic cancer, the trust held approximately $14 million. Over the next 11 years, the portfolio grew to more than $50 million. I was the sole beneficiary. My mother received a separate annuity, the house where we had lived during my childhood, and a generous medical fund. She spent the annuity, mortgaged the house, and later accused my father of humiliating her by leaving control of the larger trust to me. He always thought Evelyn was smarter, she said whenever money surfaced. He never understood that intelligence without charm makes a woman lonely. My father understood more than she knew. Before he died, he told me Margaret believed affection should be measurable through access. She will ask you to prove love by removing every barrier between her desire and your resources, he said. Never confuse refusal with cruelty, I promised. Then I spent a decade breaking that promise one emergency at a time. I paid her tax debts. I rescued the childhood house, then sold it at her request and purchased Bellhaven. I covered medical bills the insurance already reimbursed. I funded foundations that existed mainly to produce photographs of Margaret beside wealthy donors. I transferred monthly allowances through Apex subsidiaries so she would never feel dependent on me personally. Secrecy allowed her to treat my support as money generated by her own social influence. Daniel benefited even more. We met when I was 26 at a financial technology conference where he was pitching a payment platform for small retailers. The product was unfinished, the projections unrealistic, and the pitch full of energy. He did not know my family or company. He saw the plain name badge identifying me as Evelyn Quinn, portfolio analyst, and spoke to me for an hour without asking which investors I knew. That seemed rare enough to resemble character. We married 2 years later in a small ceremony at a public garden. Daniel promised he did not care about inherited wealth. I told him my father had left a protected trust but did not disclose its value. He said, "Keep it separate. I want to build our life myself." I believed him. When his startup approach collapsed 9 months into our marriage, I offered strategic help. He refused advice and accepted money. Apex Global purchased the company's debt through a venture credit subsidiary, extended the runway, and later invested through a blind institutional fund. Daniel believed a firm called Northline Capital had recognized his brilliance. I owned Northline. I approved every extension. When suppliers threatened litigation, Apex settled their claims. When Daniel needed a manufacturing partner, I directed one of our logistics companies to offer favorable terms. When the board wanted to replace him after 3 missed product deadlines, I defended him privately and allowed him to remain chief executive. He told friends he had survived because he never stopped believing in himself. At home, he called my stable salary useful but small. "One day you can stop working," he would say. "Once my company breaks through, you will not need to worry about spreadsheets." He never asked what my spreadsheets controlled. In the salon, Sienna turned toward my mother. "When do I receive the first funding?" Margaret smiled. "The $50 million enters the family vehicle after the review period. Daniel's company secures the fashion platform. You become creative director and public founder. Evelyn receives a modest divorce payment and disappears. She might challenge it. She is frightened of conflict." Daniel nodded. "She thinks signing documents carefully makes her strong, but she cannot handle public pressure. We serve her papers at the launch party, in front of investors." And Margaret explains that refusing will damage her mother's health. She signs. Sienna touched the necklace again, and if she checks the trust. Martin Shaw entered the salon carrying a leather document case. He closed the door behind him and said, "She cannot reverse the appointment easily." The signature authorizing Daniel and Mrs. Quinn as co-trustees was properly witnessed. "Properly forged," Daniel said. Martin's face tightened. "Do not use that word. She was under anesthesia," Sienna said. "How could it be properly witnessed?" My mother responded calmly. "Evelyn signed medical releases before surgery. Martin used the signature page." Martin opened the case. The authorization document contains her signature, the notary seal, and a physician acknowledgement that she was competent when she executed preoperative instructions. But she did not sign the authorization, Sienna said. The distinction matters only if she proves it. My hand tightened around the corridor railing. 3 weeks earlier, my mother had insisted on accompanying me to a preoperative consultation. I did not need surgery urgently, but the tumor had grown and the doctor recommended removal. Margaret arrived with flowers, asked unusually attentive questions, and held my bag while a nurse collected forms. Daniel called during the appointment and said a client crisis prevented him from coming. My mother helped organize the papers afterward. I remembered her separating one page from the others and asking me to sign an insurance acknowledgement. I signed without reading closely because the nurse was waiting, and the page carried the hospital logo. My mother had photographed the signature or substituted a different final page later. Martin had used it to create a false trustee authorization. The attack depended on my habit of believing family paperwork was less dangerous than corporate paperwork. That was my mistake. It was not permission. When the transfer completes, Daniel said, Apex releases the new credit line? Martin nodded. The trust assets support Mercer Technologies. The company then lends $20 million to Sienna's brand. 20? Sienna looked pleased. You said 15. The launch budget expanded, Margaret said. You need flagship stores, international press, and a proper headquarters. In Paris, eventually. Daniel moved behind Sienna and wrapped his arms around her. My wife always thought money should sit safely inside funds. We are going to make it visible. My mother raised her glass, to finally using Henry's money for someone with imagination. They drank. I stood in the corridor with a fresh incision and understood that the 3 people I had financed most generously had converted my surgery into an acquisition window. I took out my phone, opened the encrypted Apex channel, and sent one sentence to my chief counsel: initiate silent containment, trust fraud, family nexus, preserve all evidence. Daniel Cho replied within 20 seconds, location verified, do not confront, security en route. I erased the visible notification and stepped backward. The corridor led to a side staircase used by household staff. I descended without being seen. A housekeeper named Alma found me near the laundry room and asked whether I was all right. Alma had worked at Bellhaven since I purchased it. She knew Apex owned the house but did not know I controlled Apex. I need the laptop from the blue study, I said. Mrs. Quinn told staff you were not allowed upstairs tonight. Why? She said you were confused after surgery. I looked at Alma. Do I appear confused? No, ma'am. Please bring the laptop. Do not tell anyone I was here. She hesitated, then nodded. I sat on a bench while waiting. The pain medication in my bloodstream made the walls soften at the edges, but my thoughts remained precise. Silent containment was the first stage of Apex's internal fraud protocol. It suspended discretionary transfers, duplicated access logs, preserved communications, and prevented further changes without alerting the suspected parties. It did not freeze lawful personal accounts or seize property. Those steps required evidence, contract triggers, and often court orders. Apex had designed the system after an executive used a subsidiary to collateralize assets for his mistress's business. The irony would have amused me later. That night, it felt like proof that betrayal was ordinary enough to become procedure. Alma returned with the laptop and a coat. Your mother said the launch begins tomorrow at 7, she whispered. She wants the main ballroom closed until then. What launch? Sienna Vale Maison. They moved displays in all afternoon. I looked toward the ceiling. They were launching the Mistress's fashion brand in the mansion I had bought for my mother, using a $50 million trust stolen from me and a company financed through my own private credit network. Did Mrs. Quinn mention me? She said you would attend because Mr. Mercer planned a family announcement. Thank you, Alma. Will you be safe? The question startled me. Yes. I have worked for wealthy families for 22 years. When someone tells the staff a relative is confused before the relative arrives, it usually means they are afraid of what she will say. Alma had seen more clearly than I had. Do not sign anything for them, she added. I won't. I left through the service entrance. Daniel's security team waited across the road in an unmarked vehicle. They drove me to an Apex medical suite rather than my marital home. Daniel had already ordered that residence monitored because the deed belonged to an Apex trust, and Daniel Mercer had begun removing documents. Dr. Priya Desai examined my incision, told me I was an idiot for leaving the hospital, and admitted me overnight. My chief counsel arrived before midnight carrying preliminary records. Daniel Cho was 49, severe, meticulous, and one of the few people who spoke to me as though ownership increased rather than removed my capacity for bad judgment. He set a tablet beside the hospital bed. The Hart Family Trust received a trustee change instruction 48 hours ago, he said. Our internal custodian blocked final transfer because the authorization conflicted with your private identity key. They think it completed. The external portal displays provisional acceptance during the statutory review window. Your mother and husband interpreted that as control. Can they access funds? No principle. They can initiate requests which are being preserved. 2 requests already exist. He showed me the first, $20 million to Mercer Technologies for brand expansion. The second, $5 million to a new entity called Sienna Vale Maison Holdings. How did Martin submit the authorization? I asked. He used a signature image taken from hospital documents, a compromised notary credential, and a physician's statement that does not mention the trust. He combined separate pages into one digital package. The doctor appears innocent. The acknowledgement confirms only that you understood surgical consent, not trustee transfer. Correct. Martin knows the difference very well. Daniel opened another file. Your husband has been having an affair with Ms. Vale for at least 11 months. Your mother arranged meetings at Bellhaven, the Lakehurst Hotel, and an Apex-owned apartment in Paris. Apex-owned? Mercer Technologies booked the unit through a corporate travel account funded by Northline Credit. I closed my eyes. I had paid for the rooms where my husband betrayed me. How much has Daniel diverted? We have identified 3. $8 million in company funds spent outside approved purposes. Jewelry, travel, design consultants, private events, and payments to Ms. Vale's management company. The startup is insolvent without Apex support. It has been for 19 months, and the board, 2 directors suspected undisclosed related party transactions. Your intervention protected Mercer during the last leadership review. Daniel did not soften the statement. I had protected Daniel because I believed pressure made him reckless, not corrupt. I had interpreted warning signs as stress because love prefers temporary explanations. What do you recommend? I asked. Immediate disclosure to the trust court, suspension of Martin's access, termination of Mercer's Technologies discretionary facilities, and preservation of Bellhaven. We can begin tonight. The launch party? Cancel it. No, Daniel's expression did not change, which meant he strongly disagreed. Evelyn. He used my first name only when professional distance would be dishonest. You underwent surgery today. Your husband and mother forged control of your trust. You do not need to stand in a ballroom while they humiliate you to prove the fraud. They intend to solicit investors. We can stop the solicitation before guests arrive. They plan to serve me divorce papers publicly, then do not attend. I need to know whether Martin will repeat the false trust representations in front of investors. Investigators can monitor. And Sienna? Her participation can be established without theater. I looked at the ceiling. Part of me wants theater. I know. Does that make every public action unethical? No, it means your personal motive must not control the enforcement. He placed 3 documents on the tablet. The first was a temporary restraining order freezing the forged trustee appointment. The second authorized preservation and recovery of assets tied to Mercer Technologies' loan breaches. The third appointed an independent receiver if Daniel made false representations to investors after written notice. We can serve the notice tomorrow morning, Daniel said. If he continues the launch, activation becomes automatic at midnight. Why midnight? His company's final cure period expires at 12:01 a.m. We extended it twice. I remembered signing the extension while Daniel sat across from me at our kitchen table, complaining that faceless lenders did not understand visionary businesses. Then serve it at 9. Mom should remain here. I will attend the launch, as chairwoman, as his wife. That exposes you physically. Security will be present. And medically, Priya can decide. Dr. Desai, who had been pretending not to listen while reviewing my chart, said, "My medical opinion is that you should remain in bed, avoid your relatives, and reconsider every life choice that placed you in my surgical recovery suite arguing about midnight seizures. Can I attend for 2 hours in a wheelchair? No. Then 1 hour seated, no alcohol, no stairs. And you leave the moment your vital signs change." Daniel said, "I object." Priya replied, "You are a lawyer. Objection is your hobby." We created the plan before dawn. Apex's fraud team would continue monitoring the trust requests. The court would receive the forged documents. Martin would receive notice of conflicting authority, but would not be arrested unless he destroyed evidence or repeated the fraud after warning. Mercer Technologies would receive a cure notice identifying unauthorized related party spending, false collateral claims, and governance breaches. If Daniel proceeded with the launch, signed further transfers, or represented the trust as available capital, Apex's midnight protocol would activate at 12:01. It would suspend company credit, lock corporate systems, secure pledged assets, protect employee payroll, notify regulators, and place the company under independent management. Bellhaven's occupancy agreement contained a morality and fraud provision only because my mother had used the property as security for a charity loan years earlier. We would not evict her merely for betraying me. The court would decide whether the forged trust transfer and unauthorized commercial use triggered termination. Daniel warned that immediate possession was possible because Margaret had converted the private residence into an unlicensed investment venue and pledged furnishings belonging to Apex. "Do not empty the house for effect," I said. "Only secure assets legally connected to the fraud. Of course, personal furniture stay if personally owned. Medical equipment, staff housing, food, and transport are excluded, already standard. Sienna's clothing inventory? Most was purchased through Mercer Technologies after the breach notice period began. The receiver can secure it. Do not remove garments from guests or models. Evelyn." Daniel looked offended. "I do understand law. You also understand symbolism, which is why I am warning you not to let symbolism write the order." At 7 the next morning, Margaret called my hospital room. She did not know where I was. "Darling, how are you feeling?" Her voice carried concern so naturally that I wondered whether betrayal required her to feel nothing or merely allowed love and greed to exist together. "Sore. You should rest before tonight." "What is tonight?" She paused. "Daniel's company is supporting a young designer. He wants to make an announcement." "At Bellhaven?" "Yes. I know the timing is inconvenient, but the event has been planned for months. You never mentioned it. You have been so busy." "Who is the designer?" "Sienna Vale. You met her at Christmas." I had met Sienna at when Margaret introduced her as the daughter of a deceased friend and seated her beside Daniel. During dinner, Sienna praised my husband's ambition and asked whether I enjoyed ordinary office work. My mother answered for me. "Evelyn likes routine. She has never been comfortable with risk." "What announcement is Daniel making?" I asked. "Come and hear it. I had surgery yesterday. It was minor. The surgeon told me to rest. You always recover quickly. Besides, Daniel needs you there. A supportive wife does not hide during her husband's most important night." "What should I wear?" "Nothing too formal. The focus should remain on Sienna, of course. And Evelyn?" Her tone softened. "There may be some family paperwork. Do not become difficult in front of guests. We can discuss details afterward." "What paperwork?" "Daniel will explain." "Is it related to Dad's trust?" Silence. "Why would you ask that? You mentioned it during my preoperative appointment." I said no such thing. "Then I must be confused." Relief entered her voice. "Anesthesia can do that. Sleep, darling." She ended the call. My mother believed my mind was weakest when my body needed care. I spent the morning reviewing evidence. The affair itself was not an Apex crime, though company resources made it a governance issue. The trust forgery was clear. Martin's emails showed he understood I had not signed the appointment. One message to Margaret read, "We must maintain the appearance that Evelyn initiated the change before surgery." Another said, "Daniel should avoid written references to Sienna until funds settle." My mother replied, "He has waited long enough. My daughter has had Henry's money for 11 years and done nothing visible with it. That was the wound beneath her theft. She believed money not used for display had been withheld from life. She could not see Apex because I had hidden it." She saw only the trust and decided my restraint was waste. Daniel's messages were worse. He told Sienna that divorcing me would be clean once the trust was secured. He described me as emotionally dependent on Margaret and predicted I would accept a $500,000 settlement. She thinks 50 million sounds enormous, he wrote. She has no imagination. We will turn it into a global brand. Sienna asked whether he ever loved me. He replied, I love the peace. Then peace became stagnation. I read that sentence 3 times. Our marriage had been peaceful because I solved crises before they reached him. Bills disappeared. Investors arrived. Lenders extended terms. My influence created a smooth world he mistook for evidence that he had outgrown me. At noon, Apex served Mercer Technologies with the cure notice. Daniel called Northline Capital and demanded an explanation. A compliance officer told him that the company must disclose all related party transactions, trust representations, and founder conflicts before midnight. He denied wrongdoing and said the evening launch would prove new funding. The officer warned him not to represent unapproved trust assets. Daniel proceeded. At 3, Martin received notice that the trustee appointment was disputed and subject to court review. He called Margaret. Their conversation was captured under Bellhaven's security system after the property entered legal preservation. Evelyn found something, he said. Cancel the trust announcement. My mother replied she cannot have found it. She has not left the hospital. The custodian blocked final authority. Then tell Daniel not to mention the trust directly. The funding documents rely on it. Use Apex. Apex issued a breach notice. Daniel says the lender is bluffing. Apex does not bluff. My mother lowered her voice. If we cancel tonight, Sienna's investors disappear. Daniel blames me, and Evelyn begins asking questions. We move forward. Once she signs the divorce settlement, she loses standing to challenge marital transfers. That is not how trust standing works. Then draft something that does. Martin exhaled. This is becoming criminal. It became criminal when you copied the signature. Do not become frightened after cashing your retainer. He had accepted $200,000 from Mercer Technologies that morning. I want another 200, he said. After tonight, they continued. Greed rarely collapses because someone finally names it. It negotiates a higher fee. By 6, I was dressed in a dark green silk suit, the color my father used to call judicial. Priya replaced my bandage and warned that standing longer than 10 minutes could reopen the incision. A discreet medical team took positions near Bellhaven. Daniel Cho arrived in formal black carrying the court orders inside a plain portfolio. At any point, say the word and we cancel, he said. Do you expect me to cry? Yes. That was not the question. I expect your body to respond to betrayal whether your strategy approves or not. You and Priya coordinate speeches. We maintain a shared document. Delete it. It is protected work product. We entered through the rear gate at 7:45. I asked to arrive alone at the front door. Daniel objected, then allowed it because security remained within sight. Bellhaven glittered. White light washed across the limestone. Black cars lined the circular drive. A 20-foot banner bearing Sienna Vale Maison hung above the entrance. Models moved through the windows in gold, ivory, and deep red clothing. Guests included fashion editors, bankers, investors, politicians, influencers, and executives from companies controlled by Apex. The guest list had been built from my mother's social network and Daniel's borrowed credibility. I climbed the steps slowly. A door attendant I employed opened the door without revealing recognition. Margaret approached before I reached the ballroom. She wore silver silk and the sapphire necklace I had purchased for her 60th birthday. You came, she said, kissing the air beside my cheek. Her eyes moved over my suit. This is too severe. I came from the hospital. You look pale. Surgery. Do not mention it to guests. Tonight is about new beginnings. Where is Daniel? With Sienna and the press. Why is my husband with Sienna and the press? She gripped my elbow. Do not start. There will be an announcement, and you will behave with dignity. Whose dignity? The family's. She guided me toward the ballroom, then stopped near the service entrance. The front tables are full. I look through the doors. A card bearing my name sat at the family table beside Daniel's empty chair. There is a seat. We moved you. Why? Sienna's investors need proximity to Daniel. You are recovering and may wish to leave early. A staff table stood behind a decorative screen near the kitchen corridor. Two caterers were eating quickly between duties. My place card had been placed at the end. You want me to sit with staff at my husband's event? Do not say it like that. These people work hard. So do I. Then you should be comfortable. The humiliation was calculated. They wanted me physically separated from Daniel before the public divorce announcement. And if I refuse? I asked. Her expression hardened. For once in your life, do not make everything about you. She walked away. I sat at the staff table because standing hurt and because the people there offered more humanity than my family. A young server named Matteo asked whether I needed water. A catering supervisor found a cushion for my chair. Neither knew who I was. Their kindness contained no strategy. From behind the screen, I watched Daniel introduce Sienna to investors. He wore midnight blue, the same color as our wedding suit. Sienna wore a white architectural gown from her collection. My mother stood beside them like a proud parent. Photographers arranged the three together. A reporter asked whether Sienna's brand was a family partnership. Margaret smiled and said, in every meaningful sense. At 8:30, the runway presentation began. Music filled the ballroom. Models crossed a mirrored platform wearing garments purchased through unauthorized company spending. The collection was elegant but derivative, built by designers whose names appeared nowhere in the materials. Sienna accepted applause as sole creative founder. I wondered whether she had learned authorship from Daniel or simply found in him a familiar method. After the show, my husband took the stage. Mercer Technologies has always believed innovation should improve daily life, he said. Tonight, we expand that vision from digital commerce into global luxury. Screens displayed renderings of flagship stores in New York, London, Paris, and Dubai. The projected cost exceeded $80 million. Daniel announced a strategic fund backed by a generational family capital platform and institutional credit partners. That phrase was designed to imply my trust and apex without naming either. The cure notice had specifically prohibited such representation. Daniel continued. Sienna Vale Maison will receive an initial $25 million commitment and access to a further $50 million after the completion of our corporate restructuring. Investors applauded. Daniel Cho sent one message to my hidden phone. Trigger established. Receiver authorized for 12/1. Margaret appeared beside the staff table. It is time. For what? Daniel's personal announcement. She handed me a folder. Inside were divorce papers, a marital settlement, a waiver of trust claims, and a statement appointing Margaret and Daniel as financial representatives during my post-operative recovery. You forged the trust authorization, I said. Her face remained calm. Do not use emotional words. Did you? Your father intended his money to benefit the family. He named me because he knew you would share. Then why copy my signature? Because you have become selfish. I paid for this house. The words almost escaped as revelation. But I stopped. Margaret laughed. Apex paid for this house. Who do you think approved it? Daniel's investors. She believed her son-in-law more capable of creating rescue than her daughter. Sign, she said. The settlement gives you $500,000, your car, and personal belongings. Daniel keeps the marital residence and company interests. You will avoid scandal. What scandal? Your emotional instability, your surgery, your inability to support his career. Martin has prepared statements if you contest. Statements saying what? That you have become obsessive, secretive, and controlling. Secretive about my own money? Evelyn. She lowered her voice. Do not force me to choose between you and Daniel's future. You already chose. Then make this easier. She carried the folder toward the stage. I followed slowly. Daniel announced that the evening marked not only a business launch but the honest beginning of a new life. Sienna joined him. Margaret took the microphone. Families sometimes hold together relationships long after love has ended, she said. My daughter has struggled privately and Daniel has sacrificed to protect her. The audience shifted. This was cruelty disguised as concern. Tonight, Evelyn has agreed to release him with dignity. She turned toward me. Come here, darling. Cameras found me beside the stage. I climbed the steps, each movement pulling at the incision. Daniel extended the papers. We should have done this privately, he said into the microphone, ensuring it was public. But you refused every attempt at honest conversation. You never asked for one. Sign, Evelyn. Why? Because the marriage is over. Sienna stood beside him without shame. How long? I asked. He He glanced at her, long enough. Did my mother arrange it? Margaret interrupted. Do not humiliate yourself. I looked at the three of them. You used my surgery to forge control of my father's trust. A ripple moved through the guests. Martin Shaw approached the stage from the front table. That statement is false and potentially defamatory, he said. The trustee appointment was legally executed. I did not sign it. You signed the operative page in the presence of a medical witness. I signed a hospital form. You are confused because of anesthesia. He said it confidently, because invalidating my memory was part of the plan. Daniel held out a pen. Take the settlement. You have no access to the trust now. There is nothing to fight over. Nothing? You still have your salary. Sienna smiled slightly. My mother said, a woman without money should be grateful for a clean exit. That was the line that ended the daughter who still wanted her to reconsider. I took the pen. Daniel relaxed. Martin opened the folder to the signature page. I wrote one word across it in large letters, reject. Then I placed the pen down. Midnight protocol confirmed, I said. My mother frowned. What? Daniel Cho stepped through the ballroom doors with Apex's legal team, independent directors, court-appointed receivers, financial crimes investigators, and security officers. Every senior Apex executive in the room stood. The screens behind Daniel changed from fashion imagery to the black and silver Apex global emblem. A countdown appeared beneath it, 7742 until enforcement. Daniel Mercer looked toward the doors. Who authorized this? My chief counsel climbed the stage, stopped beside me, and bowed his head. Chairwoman Quinn, the Trust Protection Order, Mercer Technologies Receivership, Bellhaven Preservation Warrant, and fraud referrals are ready. Silence fell across the ballroom. Margaret stared at him, then at me. Chairwoman? I removed the plain employee access card from my handbag and placed a black metal card on the podium. It carried the Apex emblem and my full legal name. Evelyn Quinn, Executive Chairwoman and sole controlling beneficiary. The screens displayed my corporate profile, the Hart Sovereign Trust, Apex's ownership structure, and the long list of subsidiaries. Northline Capital appeared among them. Bellhaven Property Trust appeared. The bank holding my father's trust appeared. Mercer Technologies Senior Debt appeared. The marital residence appeared. My mother's expression collapsed first. Daniel looked as though he had forgotten how to breathe. Sienna stepped away from him. Apex belongs to you? Daniel asked. 100% of the controlling shares. Northline? Mine. The company credit? Approved by my committees after I requested repeated extensions. Bellhaven? Purchased through my property trust 8 years ago. Margaret gripped the podium. This house is mine. Daniel Cho answered Mrs. Quinn holds a conditional occupancy license. Ownership remains with Bellhaven Property Trust. Evelyn gave it to me. I allowed you to live here, I said. You told everyone your husband left it to you. You let me believe that. I sent annual ownership notices. Martin said they were formalities. Every face turned toward him. Martin looked at the countdown. This is an abuse of corporate power. The court reviewed the evidence, Daniel Cho said. The enforcement order is independent. She orchestrated a trap. You received notice this afternoon that the trustee authorization was disputed. You continued presenting it as valid. I relied on my client's instructions. Which client? I asked. You represented the trust, my mother Daniel's company, and Sienna's entity while concealing conflicts. Martin's face went pale. We can resolve the documentation. You created the documentation. The screens changed to show the forged authorization beside the hospital signature page. Metadata demonstrated that Martin copied the signature after I entered surgery. Notary logs showed the credential had been used remotely from his office. The physician acknowledgement came from a different document. Emails revealed Margaret's instructions and Martin's fee demands. Guests began whispering. Several investors opened phones. Then discovered the ballroom network had switched to preservation mode, allowing communication but blocking deletion from connected event devices under the court order. Martin said, "These emails are privileged. Crime-fraud communications are subject to judicial review." Daniel Cho replied, "The court has already ruled on preservation." Financial investigators approached the stage. My mother stepped toward me. "Evelyn, stop this." "Whatever Martin did, we can correct it. You instructed him." I was protecting your father's legacy by transferring it to my husband and his mistress. Sienna raised both hands. I did not forge anything. You discussed the timing and accepted a transfer request. Daniel told me the money was family capital. You asked how an anesthetized woman could sign. Her face changed. The salon recording began playing. Her own voice filled the ballroom. She was under anesthesia. How could it be properly witnessed? Martin's reply followed. The distinction matters only if she proves it. Then my mother's voice, Evelyn will not notice. Daniel's arms remained around Sienna in the video. The room watched their kiss, the champagne toast, and their plan to serve me divorce papers. Sienna covered her mouth. Daniel shouted for the screens to be turned off. The property security system captured the conversation after suspicious trust activity triggered preservation, Daniel Cho said. A judge authorized use tonight in connection with ongoing investor solicitation. My husband looked at me. You were here yesterday. I came for my laptop. You listened. You discussed my theft openly. You should have confronted me. You expected me to sign while sedated and frightened. We could have talked. You had 11 months. Margaret said, this affair has nothing to do with the trust. You arranged it in the house I bought for you. Daniel was unhappy. So you offered him another woman. Sienna understood his world. The world I funded. We did not know. The same defense repeated itself. They would have behaved differently if they knew I was powerful. You knew I was your daughter and wife, I said. That should have been enough. The countdown reached 10 minutes. A receiver named Helen Park addressed the guests. The event may continue until midnight. No guest is accused of wrongdoing merely for attending. Investors are advised that all commitments connected to Sienna Vale Maison, Mercer Technology, or the disputed Quinn Trust are suspended. Personal belongings remain protected. At 12:01, corporate and pledged assets subject to the order will enter receivership. Daniel grabbed my arm. Security moved instantly. I pulled away before they reached him. What exactly happens at midnight? He asked. Mercer Technologies loses access to Apex-funded accounts and systems. Employee payroll transfers to the receiver. Client services continue. Executive spending freezes. Assets bought through unauthorized company funds are secured. Your personal lawful property remains yours. The house? Our marital residence belongs to an Apex trust because you used company credit for the purchase. You said we bought it together. You contributed $12,000 to the deposit. Apex financed the rest after your company failed to qualify. You hid that. You signed the occupancy and security documents without reading them. You manipulated me. I prevented foreclosure. And Bellhaven, Margaret demanded. The court will terminate your occupancy because you used the property to facilitate trust fraud and unauthorized commercial solicitation. You will receive temporary housing and access to personal belongings. You are throwing your mother out at midnight? The event occupancy ends at midnight. Your residential removal begins at dawn under the court order, with transportation and 30 days of temporary accommodation. This is my home. You turned it into the headquarters of a crime against me. You cannot take the furniture. Personal furniture remains. Items purchased by Apex Mercer Technologies or the disputed trust will be inventoried. She looked around the ballroom. Nearly everything belonged to one of those entities. The chandeliers were part of the house. The art was leased through Apex. The event furniture belonged to the hospitality subsidiary. The fashion displays had been purchased with unauthorized corporate funds. Sienna touched her necklace. Is this mine? The screen displayed a transaction from Mercer Technologies. $280,000 charged to a product development account. It was a gift, she said. Purchased with misused corporate credit, Helen Park replied. You may surrender it voluntarily or retain it pending court review. No one will remove it from your body. Sienna unclasped the necklace and placed it on the podium. Daniel stared at her. Do not. You told me it came from your personal account. It would have been covered after funding. Nothing you gave me was yours. He turned to me. You wanted this moment. Part of me did. The honesty unsettled him. Then this is revenge. The legal actions were approved without my vote because of my conflict. Employees are protected. Guests are free to leave. Your lawful assets remain yours. Revenge without restraint would look different. You destroyed my company. Your company was insolvent before the affair began. You could rescue it. I already did, repeatedly. One more time. There is always one more time. My mother whispered, Evelyn, please. What are you asking me to save the house? Daniel's business, my reputation, not our relationship? She opened her mouth, but no answer came. The countdown reached 5 minutes. Martin attempted to leave the stage. Investigators stopped him. They informed him that he was under arrest for forgery, conspiracy to commit trust fraud, falsification of notarized instruments, evidence tampering, and professional misconduct connected to investor solicitation. He protested that the arrest was theatrical. The lead investigator replied, "The warrant was signed at 4:30 this afternoon. Your repeated representations tonight established continuing conduct." Margaret grabbed his sleeve. "You said no one could prove it." Martin turned on her. "You provided the signature." Daniel said, "You built the documents." Sienna said, "All of you told me it was legal." Their alliance disintegrated before the audience because greed creates partnerships without loyalty. At 1 minute to midnight, the ballroom lights dimmed. My mother gasped, assuming I had ordered darkness for drama. In reality, the event management contract had scheduled a lighting transition for the brand reveal. The receiver allowed it to continue. Emergency lights remained. The Apex emblem appeared on the screens. I stood beside the countdown while my incision throbbed beneath the suit. Daniel Cho watched me closely. "You can sit," he whispered. "Not yet. You have nothing to prove." "I know." The clock reached 12:01. The midnight protocol activated. Corporate phones in Mercer Technologies displayed access revoked. Company cards declined. Executive cloud accounts locked. The fashion brand's inventory system transferred to receiver control. Automated notices reached banks, lenders, suppliers, insurers, and regulators. Payroll funds moved into a protected employee account. The marital residence access system removed Daniel's executive code but preserved entry for supervised collection of personal property. Bellhaven's commercial event permissions ended. Security staff closed the reserve wine cellar, tagged leased art, and secured unopened fashion inventory. Trucks entered the service drive to transport corporate assets only because the court had identified immediate dissipation risk. They did not tear furniture from under guests. They did not empty personal bedrooms at midnight. Real enforcement moved carefully, with inventory, signatures, photographs, and lawyers, yet the visible effect was devastating. The world Daniel and Margaret believed they owned revealed itself as a series of borrowed objects linked to contracts they had violated. Daniel's phone vibrated continuously. He opened messages from board members resigning, investors withdrawing, and bankers requesting information. "They are blacklisting me," he said. "No," Helen replied. "Regulated institutions are responding independently to fraud and insolvency notices. Every bank is closing accounts. Corporate accounts connected to false collateral have been restricted. Your lawful personal checking account remains active. There is barely anything in it. That reflects your choices, not a protocol." My mother's face twisted. "Where is my money?" "Your pension and personal savings remain untouched," Daniel Cho said. "Foundation accounts are frozen pending audit because donor funds paid for private expenses. I have supported charities for 20 years. 9% of your foundation's spending reached beneficiaries last year." The screens displayed the audit. Travel, jewelry, events, household staff, and loans to Daniel's company consumed most of the remainder. Guests who had praised Margaret's philanthropy stared at her. Social disgrace hurt her more than financial loss. "You made me look like a criminal," she said. The records did. Investigators informed her she was not being arrested that night because the court wanted a full interview and medical review, but she was required to surrender her passport and could not access trust or foundation systems. Daniel was detained for questioning regarding wire fraud, false loan statements, corporate theft, and conspiracy. He asked whether he could leave with Sienna. She had already moved to the other side of the stage. "Do not involve me," she said. "You built this with me. You told me the money was yours. You knew Evelyn existed. You told me she was emotionally unstable and financially dependent. You slept with me anyway. That does not make me responsible for your fraud." He laughed bitterly. "You were going to become rich from it. I was going to build a brand. With her money. With funding you said was legal." Their argument continued until attorneys separated them. Guests began leaving. Some apologized to me. Others avoided my eyes. Investors requested meetings. Fashion editors whispered about whether the collection could survive without Sienna. I raised the microphone. Employees, designers, vendors, and contractors who acted in good faith will be paid. The creative team's authorship will be reviewed independently. No worker will lose lawful compensation because executives committed fraud. Several designers near the runway began crying. Sienna looked at them as though noticing for the first time that her brand contained people beyond herself. "What happens to Sienna Vale Maison?" a reporter called. "The receiver will determine whether the business has independent value. Ms. Vale will not control funds during review. Will you deny her any future career? I do not control the fashion industry. Will Apex blacklist her? Apex does not maintain personal revenge lists. We disclose verified risk and enforce contracts. And your husband, the board has suspended him as chief executive. A permanent decision follows investigation. Are you divorcing him?" I looked at the rejected papers. Yes. Daniel flinched as if he had expected power to make me want him back. "Evelyn," he said, "we can fix the marriage." "Why?" "Because you know I loved you. You loved the peace created by my invisible labor. I made mistakes. You forged access to $50 million. Martin handled that. You requested $20 million for your mistress. The company needed expansion. You called our divorce clean once the trust was secured. I was angry. You wrote it while lying beside her in Paris." He lowered his voice. "You hid who you were. Would knowledge of Apex have stopped you?" He hesitated. "Yes. Then you are admitting respect depended on power. It would have changed everything." "Exactly." Security escorted him from the stage for questioning. My mother remained. She looked older beneath the ballroom lights. "You planned this since yesterday," she said. "I prepared to stop the fraud. You could have warned me." "Martin warned you the appointment was disputed." You continued. "Because I thought you were wasting the trust. It was mine. Your father loved me too. He created a separate annuity for you. Not enough for the life we built. The life I funded." She stared at Bellhaven. "All these years? The house, taxes, staff, medical expenses, foundation shortfalls, travel, and monthly allowance. Why did you not tell me? I wanted you to love me without seeing an account." "I did love you. You copied my signature while I was undergoing surgery. Because Daniel needed capital. Why did he matter more? He made you happy once. So you gave him another woman?" Her face crumpled. "You were becoming dull together." "Sienna gave him ambition. I financed his ambition. You hid in offices. I built Apex. I did not know. You did not need to know I was a billionaire to avoid arranging my husband's affair. I thought he would leave you eventually. Then you helped him rob me first." She began crying without elegance. "I was afraid of being left with nothing. You had a mansion, annuity, medical fund, staff, and allowance. None of it was mine. You are angry because support had boundaries. A mother should not need permission from her daughter. A daughter should not need protection from her mother." She sat down in a chair near the stage. For a moment, I saw not the polished society figure but a frightened aging woman who believed access was the only reliable form of love. Understanding did not restore trust. "Will you send me to prison?" she asked. I provided evidence. "Prosecutors decide charges. Will you testify? Truthfully. Will you take Bellhaven? A court will end your occupancy. Temporary housing has been arranged. Where? A furnished 2-bedroom apartment near your doctor's. An apartment. Yes, you expect me to live like an ordinary person. You are an ordinary person." The sentence wounded her because status had become her identity. "And Bellhaven, after evidence processing. I will transfer it to the Hart Children's Foundation. An orphanage? A residential and education center for children without safe family homes. You are giving my house to strangers. It was never your house." She looked toward the windows. Dawn had begun lightening the sky beyond the gardens. The ballroom was almost empty. Staff carefully removed corporate displays. Receivers photographed inventory. Personal flower arrangements remained. Fashion racks moved into secure storage. The house did not become bare in one cinematic instant, but borrowed luxury disappeared quickly enough to reveal how little Margaret personally owned. I left through the front doors at 5:40. Priya's medical team placed me in the rear of a black Rolls-Royce owned by Apex's executive fleet. I had chosen another car, but Daniel Cho insisted the Rolls contained the medical suspension system least likely to strain my incision. The symbolism was accidental and irresistible to cameras. Reporters gathered outside as Margaret stood beneath the entrance arch watching trucks leave the service drive. I did not speak to her. The car took me back to the medical suite, where Priya discovered minor bleeding and ordered 48 hours of bed rest. "Was it worth it?" she asked. "Not tonight." "That is usually no. The fraud stopped. The fraud could have stopped while you slept." The public solicitation needed intervention. The chairwoman needed witnesses. I looked away. Yes, she adjusted the blanket. Admitting revenge does not make it safe. It only makes it honest. I slept for 14 hours. When I woke, my phone showed 68 missed calls from Margaret. She had called every few minutes after the receivers left Bellhaven. Some messages demanded access to the house. Some accused me of abandoning her. Some said she loved me. Some threatened to tell the press I had engineered the entire scandal. The final message said, "Evelyn, please, I am your mother. Answer once." I blocked the number. Not forever, I told myself. Only until I could hear her voice without returning to the corridor outside the salon. The legal cases lasted nearly 2 years. Martin Shaw's conduct was the easiest to prove. Metadata, emails, notary fraud, billing records, and his own warning messages established that he knowingly created the false trustee appointment. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy, forgery, trust fraud, evidence manipulation, and professional misconduct. He lost his license and received 9 years in prison. Daniel faced corporate theft, false financial statements, wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud the trust, and misuse of company credit. Prosecutors did not charge him for adultery because betrayal is not a crime. They charged him for spending corporate funds on the affair and using forged trust authority to solicit investment. He cooperated after 6 months, returned assets, and testified against Martin. He received a 7-year sentence, partly suspended after 4, along with restitution and a 10-year ban from serving as an officer of a regulated company. The divorce court enforced our prenuptial agreement. Daniel had insisted on it before marriage because he believed my father's trust was modest and wanted to protect his future company. The agreement separated inheritances, trusts, and business holdings. His fraud voided claims to marital support. He retained lawful personal savings, clothing, family photographs, and a vehicle he had purchased before misusing company funds. He lost the marital residence because Apex's trust owned it. He wrote to me repeatedly from prison. The first letters blamed my secrecy. "You let me believe I was carrying us," he said. "I might have been different if I knew." I answered once, "A man who needs his wife to be a billionaire before treating her honestly is not describing love." His second set of letters blamed pressure from my mother and Sienna. His third set became more honest. "I loved how calm life felt with you," he wrote. "I never asked who kept making the emergencies disappear. When success arrived, I assumed it proved I was extraordinary. When the company struggled, I blamed your caution." Sienna made me feel admired without asking whether the admiration had evidence. I chose the version of myself reflected in her attention. He admitted knowing the trust signature was false. "I told myself your father's money should help the marriage, and the marriage was already over, so taking control early was only timing." That sentence captured how intelligent people make theft sound administrative. I did not answer again. Sienna was not charged with forgery because evidence showed she did not create the documents. She was charged with receiving misappropriated corporate funds and making false statements to investors. She entered a deferred prosecution agreement, surrendered the necklace and other assets, repaid part of the funds, and cooperated with the receiver. The independent review found that most of her collection had been designed by an underpaid team led by a woman named Leila Moreno. Apex sold the brand assets to an employee-led company that credited the designers properly. Sienna lost control but not the legal right to work. She later became a stylist for private clients. In an interview years afterward, she said, "I believed being chosen by a married founder proved I was powerful. It actually proved I was willing to build identity from another woman's erasure." I read the sentence and felt no need to respond. Context mattered. Sienna was young, ambitious, and manipulated by Daniel. She also made choices. Both truths remained. Margaret's case was more complicated. She had directed the forgery, accepted control requests, concealed the affair, and attempted to use the trust. but she claimed Martin assured her that family benefit doctrines made the transfer legal. The recordings contradicted complete innocence. She pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit trust fraud, falsification of documents, charity misuse, and obstruction. Her age, health, lack of prior convictions, and cooperation reduced the sentence. She received 5 years with 18 months in custody and the remainder under strict home supervision. The public called it either cruelty toward a mother or leniency toward an architect of theft. Courts do not sentence the entire history between a mother and daughter. They sentence provable acts. I submitted a factual victim statement and did not request maximum punishment. Bellhaven entered receivership during the investigation, then returned to the Apex Property Trust. I transferred it to the Hart Children's Foundation exactly as promised. The East Salon, where I witnessed the affair, became a counseling and family reunification room. The ballroom became a library, assembly hall, and art studio. Guest suites became residential rooms for children transitioning out of unsafe homes. The staff wing became offices for social workers and legal advocates. Alma remained as facilities director. When reporters called the donation revenge, I corrected them. A house used to disguise betrayal can become useful without becoming symbolic punishment. The foundation named no room after me or Margaret. Children should not live inside adults' monuments. My mother's temporary apartment was comfortable, secure, and close to medical care. During home supervision, she had a small pension, personal savings, and basic support. I provided no private allowance. For the first time in decades, she tracked expenses herself. She wrote letters because I had blocked her phone. The early ones were angry. "You left me with nothing," she said, though she had housing, income, healthcare, furniture, and legal support. Nothing meant no longer having staff and unmonitored access. "You embarrassed me before everyone I knew. You stole from me after surgery. Your father would hate what you did. Your father created the trust to prevent it." She compared her apartment to prison. She described supermarket shopping as humiliation. She asked whether I could at least restore the driver. I did not answer. 6 months later, the letters changed. "I found an old statement from the Bellhaven Trust," she wrote. "Your name was not on it, but I see now that you signed the funding approval through E. Hart. You paid the property taxes the year I told everyone Daniel covered them. I thanked him. He accepted. You were sitting at the table. I remembered the dinner. Margaret raised a glass to Daniel for rescuing the house. I smiled and said nothing because revealing the truth felt like demanding gratitude. Silence allowed a lie to become family history. Her next letter said, "I keep asking why I arranged his relationship with Sienna. I told myself you had become cold. The truth is that Daniel's attention made me feel connected to youth, ambition, and importance. He asked my advice. You solved problems without needing me. I preferred the person who performed dependence. That was the first sentence that reached me. I still did not visit. Recognition is not repair." Daniel was released after serving 4 years and entered supervised employment with a nonprofit assisting failed entrepreneurs. He never returned to finance leadership. He requested a meeting. I declined. "You owe me closure," he wrote. My attorney replied, "Closure is not a marital asset." Margaret completed her sentence and continued therapy. 2 years after the launch, she asked through a counselor for one supervised meeting. I agreed. We met in a neutral office with no family photographs. She had aged. Her hair was white at the temples. She wore a simple navy dress and no jewelry except her wedding ring. "You blocked 68 calls," she said. I counted. So did I. "I thought if I kept calling, you would answer the way you always did." Exactly. She looked down. "I loved you. Perhaps. You do not believe me. I believe love can exist beside exploitation. That does not make the exploitation smaller. I was afraid of losing everything. You had already received more than most people. It never felt mine because it was support, not ownership." "Yes," she breathed slowly. "Your father never trusted me. He gave you an annuity and medical fund. He gave you the future. He gave me responsibility. I saw it as judgment. So you stole it. I told myself I was correcting his favoritism. You favored Daniel over your daughter." She closed her eyes. "Yes. Why? Because he needed me to open doors. You kept becoming harder to influence. Independent. I called it cold because independence made me less central. Her honesty hurt differently from denial." Do you expect a relationship? I asked. I hope for one. What kind? Occasional contact. No money, no requests, no public reconciliation. She had listened to the therapist, and Bellhaven, it belongs to the children. Do you resent them? At first. She looked ashamed. Then I visited the public wing during an open day. A girl showed me the library and said it was the first place she had slept without hearing adults argue over who had to keep her. I could not call it my house after that. We agreed to meet every 3 months. I did not restore financial access. She did not enter Apex buildings or my home. Trust rebuilt only in narrow, testable actions. Several times, she slipped into old habits, hinting that her friends lived better or that Daniel's release created responsibility. I ended the meeting each time. Boundaries work only when consequences follow quietly. Over years, she stopped asking. Apex changed because of my failures as well as theirs. I commissioned an independent review of my hidden financial support, conflicts involving Mercer Technologies, and decision to delay disclosure until the launch party. The committee found that my direct interventions had protected Daniel from accountability and distorted company governance. By defending him privately, I had overridden warning systems created to protect employees and investors. My secrecy created concentration risk. My desire for a public reveal influenced timing after sufficient evidence already existed. None of that excused the fraud, but ethical leadership required examining the power I used before betrayal. I published the findings to the board and accepted restrictions. Family-related investments required independent approval without my participation. Apex prohibited controlling owners from secretly subsidizing relatives through blind entities. Beneficiaries had to be informed when support could reasonably create dependency or governance conflicts. I had believed silent sacrifice was pure because it asked for no gratitude. In practice, it hid truth, removed accountability, and gave me emotional influence no one could evaluate. Love and governance both deteriorate when one person holds invisible control. The $50 million trust returned fully to my authority after the court invalidated the forged appointment. Legal fees and recovery costs were paid by the offender's assets where possible. I did not spend the trust on luxury. I divided it into 3 vehicles. $20 million funded financial abuse legal services for women and elderly people whose families forged signatures or coerced transfers. $15 million supported independent housing for adults leaving unsafe relatives. $10 million created scholarships in my father's name for students in mathematics, finance, and public infrastructure. $5 million remained as a personal reserve, honoring his intention that I possess something no one else could access. For the first time, using the trust felt less like guarding a shrine and more like continuing his judgment. Apex Global eventually moved beyond my sole ownership. I transferred 40% into an employee trust, 20% into public benefit foundations, and 10% into a long-term infrastructure fund with mission protections. I retained 30% and voting safeguards during transition, then stepped back from executive control. No spouse, child, or parent could inherit the company automatically. Leadership required qualifications, review, and removable authority. My board asked whether family betrayal had made me hostile to inheritance. No, I said. It made me hostile to treating blood as proof of competence or entitlement. I remained unmarried for years. Public stories attached me romantically to Daniel Cho because he appeared beside me at the launch. He was married to a historian and found the rumors irritating. Our relationship remained what it had always been, professional loyalty sharpened by disagreement. He never knelt, kissed my hand, or called me queen. He called me reckless when I was reckless and prepared documents that prevented my grief from becoming policy. That was more valuable. I later met Dr. Lena Morrison, a legal psychiatrist advising our Financial Abuse Foundation. She knew my identity, wealth, history, and fear from the beginning. We became friends slowly. The absence of secrecy frightened me because I could not test whether she respected a powerless version of me. She told me the test itself was a form of control. You cannot guarantee that someone will never betray you, she said. You can disclose reality, watch repeated choices, and leave when the evidence changes. We married after 5 years in a private civil ceremony. Margaret was invited under clear conditions. She attended, sat quietly, and made no speech. Daniel Mercer was not invited. Sienna sent a handwritten apology but no gift. At the reception, Margaret approached Lena and said, "Do not let Evelyn pay for everything silently." Lena answered she does not. My mother smiled sadly. Good. That small exchange meant more than public repentance. Daniel wrote one final letter after hearing about the marriage. "I spent years thinking the greatest betrayal was that you hid Apex," he said. "Now I understand that knowledge would only have changed my calculation. It would not have made me loyal. I wanted to be admired more than I wanted to be honest. You gave me a life without visible friction, and I decided the absence of friction proved I was carrying the weight. When I discovered you were the structure underneath, shame became anger." He apologized without asking for contact. I placed the letter in a file and did not answer. Forgiveness, when it came, was not reunion. It was the disappearance of the need to imagine him suffering. Margaret died in her late 70s after a stroke. Her advance directive named a professional medical proxy rather than me. She had learned that love should not automatically become legal authority. I visited during her final week. She asked whether I still counted the 68 calls. Sometimes, I believed persistence was love. Persistence can be refusal to hear no, I know. She looked toward the window. Did justice leave me with nothing? No. Your choices removed access to things you never owned. Justice left you with what was lawfully yours, and the opportunity to become different. Was I different? Sometimes? Is that enough? It has to be, because people rarely change completely. She smiled. Your father would like that answer. He preferred cleaner math. He preferred you. That was never the competition you imagined. Tears moved across her face. I know now. She died 2 days later. I arranged a small funeral and spoke honestly. Margaret had been charismatic, frightened of dependence, generous when generosity increased her influence, cruel when she felt irrelevant, and capable of partial change after consequences removed the audience. Some relatives wanted a softer portrait. I refused to turn death into another forged document. Bellhaven continued housing children. On the 10th anniversary of the transfer, Alma invited me to visit the library. A plaque near the former salon doors read, "No child is a family asset." The foundation director asked whether I wanted my name added as donor. "No," I said. "The house does not need another powerful adult's identity above the entrance." In the East Salon, children were painting at long tables. The glass corridor where I once watched Daniel and Sienna kiss now displayed drawings, school awards, and photographs of residents graduating. I stood there for a long time. The architecture had not changed. Meaning had. That was the closest I came to believing reclamation could be physical. People continue telling my story through the sensational title. My mom helped my husband steal my $50 million trust to fund his mistress at dawn. I unmasked as the group chairman and left them with nothing. The title is accurate enough to create anger and wrong enough to distort justice. They were not left with nothing. Daniel retained lawful property and the chance to rebuild after prison. Sienna retained the right to work after restitution. Margaret received housing, health care, pension income, legal representation, and later limited contact. Employees kept their wages. Designers kept their work. Guests kept personal belongings. I did not blacklist anyone from every bank. Compliance systems responded to verified fraud and insolvency. I did not empty Bellhaven merely because my mother insulted me. A court secured assets tied to crime. Precision matters because revenge becomes dangerous when audiences learn that the injured person's power replaces law. My power accelerated evidence, protected workers, and prevented the trust from disappearing. It did not create guilt. Their choices did. The true wipeout was not the furniture leaving Bellhaven or corporate cards going dark at 12:01. It was the collapse of the story they had lived inside. Daniel believed success proved he had built the company. Records showed I had kept it alive. Margaret believed Bellhaven demonstrated her social value. The deed showed she had occupied it through my support. Sienna believed Daniel's wealth would crown her. The money belonged to employees, lenders, and a wife they had dismissed. Martin believed documents could manufacture authority. Metadata preserved the theft. I believed silent sacrifice was love at its highest form. The betrayal revealed it had become a structure protecting everyone from accountability except me. That belief was the hardest asset to seize. For years after the launch, I still felt guilty when refusing requests. I still interpreted other people's disappointment as proof that I had failed. Therapy taught me to hear the old family script. Useful daughters rescue, good wives absorb, loving mothers receive, visionary husbands spend. Each boundary felt violent because I had been trained to experience self-protection as aggression. Over time, no became less dramatic. I stopped paying hidden bills. I disclosed conflicts. I allowed companies to fail when rescue would preserve misconduct. I let adults solve their own emergencies. The world did not end. Some relationships did. That was not always tragedy. On the day I signed the final transfer reducing my apex voting control, I wore the same dark green suit from the launch party. The incision scar had faded to a pale line. Daniel Cho asked whether the suit was symbolic. "It is well tailored," I said. "You are becoming emotionally healthy in a deeply annoying way." I learned from counsel. Impossible. We signed in a small boardroom without cameras. At 12:01, nothing froze. Authority simply moved into structures larger than my family and safer than my secrecy. I returned home to Lena, who had cooked dinner badly and refused to let me order a replacement. We ate at the kitchen table while rain touched the windows. No one asked what I funded. No one needed me to disappear for the room to remain peaceful. That ordinary evening felt like the wealth I had been trying to purchase all along. The last time I dreamed of the East Salon, I did not see Daniel kissing Sienna. I saw myself behind the glass, injured, silent, and still hoping my mother might open the door and choose me. In the dream, I walked away before they finished speaking. I did not activate a protocol, call lawyers, or wait for dawn. I simply understood that their decision had already released me from the obligation to keep paying for access to people who treated my devotion as a weakness. That was the real reckoning, not the black cart, the Rolls-Royce, the court orders, or the empty ballroom. It was the moment I stopped asking whether blood, marriage, history, or generosity made betrayal more forgivable than it was. When greed blinded blood, justice remained. But justice alone was not freedom. Freedom was allowing the law to handle what it could, boundaries to handle what the law could not, and time to separate love from ownership. My mother helped my husband forge my trust. My husband funded his mistress with my invisible labor. I exposed them, recovered the money, dissolved the false empire, and watched the sun rise over a house they had mistaken for proof of their own importance. Yet none of those things made me whole. Wholeness arrived later in the first bill I refused to pay, the first call I allowed to stop ringing, the first relationship I entered without a hidden test. And the first night I understood that love was not measured by how much of myself I could surrender before someone finally called me family. Bye.